moderation and rational decision making, and certainly mainstream stands for that. We may have to, do we have one come in? I was going to say, if there are any elected officials here, wave your hand, say hello. See, I saw you there. Well, yeah. Okay. And Skateboard, there you are, over there. Okay. Just wanted to make those folks that are working so hard for us in Topeka. And I also want to acknowledge a couple of our sponsors. We have El Centro here, and do you want to say a couple of words just real quickly about, always take advantage of the opportunity?
That's right, thank you, Kathy. Hi, I'm Clayton Hunter with El Centro. I do development and communications for the organization. Our CEO, Irene Caudillo, sends her regrets. She is not able to attend this evening. She's doing some leadership training. And I've got Norma here with me. We've got information on the back table about El Centro and what we do, serving primarily Latinos in Wyandotte and in Johnson County. I'd like to thank Valdini Wynn, Val, for your efforts on behalf of the undocumented students that pay in-state tuition. And there was Bell's Education Committee last week. We were at the hearing, and Valdini stood up and called the committee what they are. So. That's about all you can say. Not everybody on the committee, just a few, the majority. And thank you, Valdini, on behalf of El Centro and the 650 pay in-state tuition because of the efforts of people, like-minded people in this room. So thank you very much, Kathy.
Yeah. As you'll find out, we kind of tell it like it is here. I have a representative, actually, the president of the Student NEA. And Kimberly, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Kathy, but I'm not the student chair. I sit on the board of directors for the NEA, the student program. The NEA, National Educational Association, believes behind every school between the families and the students. That is how we believe children need to be educated. We strongly emphasize that anymore we have to reach out to the community, to all of our students, to all of our family members, and that is what we're working on strongly this year, is building up the coalitions between the students and the parents and the educators. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Norm Scott. Norm is the chair of the Wyandotte Democratic, which is different from the Wyandotte County Democratic Society that some of you may have heard from. I just wanted to be clear about that. And Norm is also a political activist and certainly involved in the community and giving back to the community. Lines and his leadership role with his neighborhood, which is the Stony Point, Hunters Glen neighborhood. And he is also, along with Sue Storm, two of our new members of the program committee, and we are thrilled to have them even more involved in it. Take it away.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I heard that there was sunshine going on here. We just happened to get a bad day. I want to introduce our guests. We have two speakers, Mike Taylor, who is the lobbyist for the UG, and David Smith, who works for the assistant
public schools chief of staff.
Chief of staff. Okay. And I did ask Mike if there was any questions that he wanted me to ask or get started. He said no. When I get started, why, I'll just rant on and it'll all be okay. So if you guys will, do a little tag team stuff here, and Mike will get started.
Okay, I'm gonna stand if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of known at the State House for going on rants sometimes. So this is the legislature and local government. I want to ask how many of you here have ever gone to the liquor store and bought a bottle of wine or beer on Sunday? Yeah, that's local control. And that was Wyandotte County. That was back in 2000, and Wyandotte County realized that liquor sales on Sunday were not allowed. But we had 100,000 people a weekend coming to NASCAR races, and we wanted to sell some booze and wine and whatever for the race fans. So we used local control. To pass a local ordinance that allowed Sunday sales of liquor in liquor stores. The state legislature at that time said, no, we don't like that. We're going to challenge you. We went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no, that's local control. That's home rule. They can do that. And now, in almost any city in the state, you can go to the liquor store. That's local control. There is in the Kansas Constitution a home rule amendment, Article 12, Section 5, that was passed almost 60 years ago by an overwhelming majority of Kansas residents that said, we like small government. We want cities to be able to have their own decisions to make, and the legislature doesn't have to make those decisions. We're battling that right now because the majority of the legislature doesn't like that idea. But it was passed by a majority of the citizens in Kansas almost 60 years ago. The irony that I find is many of the legislators today say we're against big government, intrusive government, we're in favor of small government, but every day they meddle in city and county government. And they try to, we don't like what you're doing there, so we're going to control that. It is so hypocritical. And I've said that in front of a number of committees before. They don't like it when I say that. They're hypocrites, the majority of them. Not all of them. Not being, I'm not, you understand, right? I'm saying the majority. The majority. Let me give you another example of the small government that the majority of the legislature believes in. There's a bill, Senate Bill 65. I tested this with guns. And what it basically says is that we're going to pass a law that says even if the unified government or the city of Wichita or the city of Salina has a personnel policy that says we don't want our workers carrying guns while they're on the clock, the legislature now is trying to say, well, no, that's wrong. We're going to intercede in your personnel policies. You can't tell your workers they can't do that. Now, how is that small government? How is that less intrusive government? It's not. It is them interceding into our personnel policies. And when I testified, a senator from there, Jake LaTurner, said, I don't understand the difference between, because I made the example of why don't you pass that same policy for Sprint or General Motors or Coke Industries. And I actually said Coke Industries. And they're like, well, those are private companies. You're publicly funded. And I said, but in terms of operating a workplace, we're the same as they are. We've got 2,000 employees. And we're trying to operate a workplace. And those are our policies. And now you're interceding. And then I said, I've seen you guys object so much to federal government, whether it's Obamacare or it's gun laws or you name it. And you object to that. And in fact, the legislature has passed some laws saying, federal government, we're not going to follow your laws. But us as local government, you're interceding and telling us how to do things. It's hypocritical. But I will tell you that one about this legislature, and I will look at Aldini and say, tell me if I'm right or wrong. Ideology trumps facts with the majority of this legislature. It doesn't matter what facts you give them, the ideology will trump the facts. If I believe it enough, it'll be true. And that is so damn frustrating. You arguably and try to make a point using facts and statistics. It's very frustrating. But that's the way it is. I mean, I was in a tax committee hearing in the House the other day where they were presenting information about the state budget and how these tax cuts, the income tax cuts, have helped Kansas and have worked. And Richard Carlson, former head of the tax committee, who now works for the Administration of Revenue, said, I just believe that if you cut taxes and let people keep more money in their pockets, it's going to be good for the economy. Well, we're $600+ million short. We can't get a budget passed. We don't have any way to pay the bills for basic services, but he just believes that that's a good thing. It's ideology over facts. Okay, there was a little bit of a rant. I want to talk about the impact on local government, because that was kind of the topic. So what is the impact of the legislative actions over the year? Well, first of all, last year the legislature passed elimination of the mortgage registration fee. It's been, when you buy a house and you go register your mortgage, you would pay this tax on your mortgage. It's been in law since 1925. The legislature last year, because of the bankers, and big bankers and community bankers and a few others, eliminated that fee. The effect of that is the unified government with $500,000 this year, and annual losses will grow up to $8.1 million a year. That saves Bank of America, the community banks, that saves the bankers and the realtors money. The machinery equipment tax, which quite honestly was good for us in terms of General Motors, but when you go buy a big piece of equipment, excuse me, at your factory and put it in, you used to have to pay taxes on that. We're a very industrial community. That measure, which was Route 6, and I will say every member of the Wyandotte County delegation voted against that, but it still passed. We're losing $10 million a year in revenue because of that. It's cost us, we've lost $130 million in assessed valuation in our tax base since that happened. Now, did it help us get GM to expand? Yes, it did. But will we actually recover every dollar of that? And you know who pays for that? Any of you own a home in Wyandotte County? Your property taxes will go up because of that. The ad valorem tax reduction fund, which has been around since 1937, and then in 1970 it was kind of reconfigured, a sharing program that the state had with local governments. Back in the late 70s, local government had the ability to tax cigarettes, alcohol, gasoline, and a few other things. The state said, you know, that's really awkward, and we would just like to do that as a state tax. And cities gave up that authority to tax that locally and said, but in exchange, we want to be able to share some of that revenue. Well, that existed until 2003, and then they said, you know, revenues are really tight, we're going to stop that. Our argument has been, and again this year, and I testified recently on this, just 2 weeks ago, that was a contract that we made with the state. We made a contract. We gave up something, you promised something, we signed the deal, it's a contract. As soon as money got tight for the state, they broke the contract. The unified government since 2003 has lost 36 revenue that was promised us. through that contract. Guess who's picking up the tab for that? Do you have a home in Wyandotte County? You're picking up the tab. There was a bill just 2 weeks ago in House Tax. They said, we just want to take that off the books and act like it never existed. And the point I made was, we made a contract, we had a deal. You broke the contract, you've been breaking it since 2003, and now what you want to do is just tear up the contract. Don't do that. And what I said to the committee, which didn't go well, I said, because at least leave it on the books so that if the sun ever does shine again in Kansas, maybe you can keep your promise and pass. They won't. They won't ever do it. They won't do it. We still get a lot of money from the state because there's a partnership there. I mean, we're government. We provide services: police, fire, EMS, streets, and the state provides services, and we're partnering that. And we ought to work together. But it's hostile right now because we are the enemy. I mean, there have been bills introduced that would basically prevent what I do, going over and representing this community and this local government, from even being in the State House. And they keep talking about transparency, but I will tell you that the legislature is the most non-transparent government entity in the state of Kansas. I mean, the transparency is like that brick wall. They will post hearings at the last. It's very difficult to deal with them. And again, it's the ideology. And so, and there's now a bill that's going to be coming up soon, excuse me, that will change our local elections, move them to the fall instead of the spring. And in the history of Kansas, they've always been in the spring. The argument is from many of the Republicans, increased voter turnout. That's not the real reason. It's what I call the world domination theory. The governor has the executive branch. If you remember your 9th grade civics, okay, there's the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch. Republicans, conservative Republicans, control the executive branch. They control the legislative branch. They've kind of halfway gotten the judicial branch because they were able to appoint to the appeals court whoever the governor wants. They're moving to try to get the Supreme Court, and now they govern above it. Because if they can elect people to the local government, city councils, the school boards, the Unified Government Commission, the same kind of people that are in the legislature, they've won the war. There will be nobody there for local control and the Home Rule Amendment that's in the Kansas Constitution. They want to move it to the fall and increase voter turnout in the odd numbered years, which are when city and school board elections are. Okay, we can go with that. But that's not what they want to do, is make them partisan and put them in the fall and even number years. So your Unified Government Commission District 3 commissioner will be on the same ballot as the president, the Senate, the Congress, the legislature, the governor. Nobody's going to notice. And then, and here's my domination, my conspiracy theory a little bit. Secretary of State Chris Kobach came in and said, well, let's just put single party voting. So all you have to do is walk in and punch the R button or the D button, and it'll vote from president all the way down to dog catcher, the Republican. Now, I really don't want to sound too paranoid, but ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is funded largely by the Cokes and others, have now started a new group called the ACCE, American City County Exchange. And what they've started doing is, we've got most of the legislatures in the country, let's start looking at city and county governments. So they're now introducing city ordinances, model ordinance, to send out across to try to take over local government as well. It's a rough time, And so the impact of the legislature on Topeka, or of Topeka on local government is immense. And we try to fight every day. More and more, certain legislators, there's a bill right now we're fighting, would try to prevent people like me from even going over there and fighting for local communities. So that's probably kind of a downer message, but I'll answer questions later. It's a rough time over there, and people like Wyandotte are there fighting, and our whole delegation is fighting, but the informed minority. And they don't really have the ability or the number of votes to really do anything positive. And I thought it was interesting because the city elections bill, they're talking about let's increase voter turnout. After that bill passed the Senate and passed the House committee, it's waiting on the floor. President Obama said, you know what we need is mandatory voting. That's the way to increase turnout. And I've said for years, if we had, instead of 10% or 12% or 30% turnout in elections, if we had 100% turnout, we would not have the Congress we have today. We would not have the state legislature we have today. We would not have the governor we have today. And I've managed election campaigns before. The thing you want to do is limit the turnout and get your folks to turn out in force and keep other people away. And I think it's unfortunate that we have so many folks who just really don't care and they don't go vote. And we're paying the price for that. I'll let David talk and then I'll stand for questions because he's got a whole other thing to talk about with schools.
Let me say one thing. There will be questions afterwards, and I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, but there'll be some cards. As the conversation goes along, write a question down, and we'll have a question and answer time. Okay?
Raise your hand if you have a question. I'll give you a card and pencil.
Hello. Hello. We began, Mike and I drew lots, and he got to be the one to give you the cheeriness. Yeah, it's hard to even know where to begin by giving a shout out to our folks in Topeka, because we're actually live streaming this to Topeka. So say hello to the folks in Topeka. And when I say the word Topeka with a little bit of derision and scorn, I'm not talking directly about you. I'm really talking about the State House. So I just want to say that. It's not really about you guys. So Mike, you were talking about the will of the people and how they voted 60 years ago. And I think I'm going to start there because Article 6 of the Constitution was amended in the early 1960s. And Article 6 of the state constitution gives the legislature the responsibility for providing suitable funding for public education. And that's important because we fund education here in Kansas as a combination of state funds with a little bit of federal funding, but that's not really germane to this conversation. But ultimately, it's up to the legislature to provide a suitable funding for the children of Kansas. That was the will of the people of Kansas in our state constitution. 3 times, school districts who felt that the legislature was not living up to its responsibility went to court. Those school districts won, most recently in the Gannon versus State of Kansas case. The last 2 times when the school district won, the legislature made promises ago about some promises the legislature made and then reneged on. Well, they did it with schools too. They made promises. They then cut the revenue source that would allow them to fulfill those promises by cutting taxes at a time when there were loud voices saying, if you do that, you're not going to be able to fulfill your promises. Now, they are not able to fulfill their promises, and we're back in court again. Let's see, so about a year ago, the year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the trial court ruled for the plaintiffs. It went to in March of last year, the Supreme Court ruled for the plaintiffs on the issue of equity for school funding, the differences in funding between districts, and gave a pretty direct roadmap to the legislature for how to fix that. Eventually did that last session. It didn't necessarily mean new money for districts like ours. In fact, when we look at it, even though we were able to, we're very pleased to be able to do a significant reduction in our mill levy. So it, as taxpayers, you kind of got some money back. It didn't actually mean more money that went into classrooms for our district, at least. But the legislature did what they were supposed to do. But it's also been clear, the other side of that case, there was that solved the equity piece of it, but then there was also the more important adequacy piece. Is the state providing sufficient funding for public schools? And that the legislature directed the trial courts to go back and review and make sure that sufficient evidence had been presented and to respond to that. And the trial court did that on December 30th, ruling the legislature was not providing adequate funding. And without saying you need to do this specifically, it kind of gave a broad range of what responding might look like. That's been appealed to the Supreme Court. Less than 3 weeks after that ruling, Governor Brownback, in his State of the State address, argued that the school funding formula, which is seen across the country as a model for how schools should be funded, because what it does, it directly connects the needs of individual kids to how we fund schools. For example, Mike, who grew up in speaking only Lithuanian and came here not speaking any English, it's going to cost us to educate Mike to the same standards as Mr. Bland, who grew up speaking English, how to speak English at the same time as we teach him everything that Mr. Bland needs to learn as well. It's going to cost us more to serve Mike. So the current formula that we have provides additional funds based on the needs of individual students. So when they call those weights, so there's a weight for English learners, students growing up in poverty, because we know that students growing up in poverty can reach the same high levels of academic achievement as middle class students, but it takes more because of what they don't bring with them to school. We can do it, but it costs more. There are weights for things like transportation. We know that, compared to our costs for busing in far western Kansas, where there are, lots of space between schools, kids have to drive for an hour on the bus, maybe 30, 40, 50 miles. It's going to cost those districts more to fund transportation because of the kids they serve. The formula directly connects those things. The governor argued that the formula was too complicated. Casey Arden and I showed the other day where they had a high school math teacher figure the formula out on air. That complicated. And it does spend approximately half of a $6 billion state budget. So my argument is it probably should be complicated. But it's not that complicated. It does exactly what a formula is supposed to do. But he argued it was out of date, that it was too complicated, that it was the argument about, he criticized the weights. He said we were funding phantom kids. When the formula was created, the legislature to the system that we have agreed to, and there's a balance of local taxes and parts that we fund locally and parts that we fund statewide. They understood it and agreed to it, and now in a remarkable case of amnesia, nobody understands why we fund schools the way we do. So he proposed to eliminate the formula, to throw it out. Not throw it out and immediately get a new one because it's complicated. Oh no, that's right, it's not complicated, sorry. But for whatever reason, he didn't want to get a new formula. He said, we'll throw it out and we'll just fund schools for the next 2 years, 15-16 and 16-17, based on what they got this year after we cut them again. The idea, I mean, he calls that block grants. And his argument, and as a part of that, he said, well, schools will like this because we'll give them more flexibility. They'll have the flexibility, they can spend the money however they want. Right now, we, for example, who heard about the Sumner piano? Anybody hear about the Sumner piano? Yeah. So we now have a budget that for what we call capital outlay, capital expenses, long-term expenses, and the piano we replaced was there for 50 years. So that kind of counts as a long-term expense. But money that we have in that budget, we don't spend for personnel, staff, those kinds of things. The governor argues that we could have taken the money that we spent for the piano and hired somebody. And he said stability, not, of course, acknowledging the fact that that is a 50-year investment in that piano, and we could pay for a staff person for only 1 year with the same money. But he would argue that we give districts more flexibility with these block grants. They can use the money however they want. If they want a teacher instead of a piano, they can do that. Of course, the bill means less money for schools than we currently have. And it also provides no money for any increases for students. So this current year we're in, we have 400 more students than what we got funded for at the beginning of the year. Because the legislature decided last year what to give us based on last previously. They would do a supplemental budget to provide us resources for the kids that we got, the new kids. We got 400 new kids. Based on just the base state aid per pupil, that's about $1.5 million. Because of the weights we receive for our kids, it would probably be up close to $3 million that we're not getting for this year. That we won't see that $3 million. So that's another $3 million we won't see for next year. Plus, we're going to grow more. We've been growing the last 5 years. So it might be another $6 million next year. And then twice that the year after that, because all of it's cumulative. So telling us that we have flexibility in terms of how we use our money when we actually have far less money is essentially saying we have the ability to choose which students we're going to hurt. And that doesn't feel like flexibility to us. So now in January, the governor proposed these block grants. Then in a freakish act of speed, nothing happened for months. And then 2 Thursdays ago, all of a sudden there was a press conference and there was going to be a bill. And then they said in a press conference where they didn't actually have a bill, they said, well, the bill will be out later today. Oh, and we're going to have hearings on Monday. The school districts will get what they call the run, the printouts that say, here's how the bill's going to affect you. Well, oh, and by the way, if you want to speak on Monday, you have to tell us on Thursday afternoon without seeing the run. So then Friday, we didn't get it on Thursday afternoon, we got it Friday morning. It was difficult because, it was also complicated. Even though it was block grants, it was still 70 pages to describe these block grants. So it was complicated. It went quickly. Hearings on Monday, passed the House on Tuesday, was heard in the Senate. And actually what they did this lovely maneuver called a gut and go, where you take an unrelated Senate bill, in this case, Senate Bill 7, thing out of it. So the bill that's already passed the Senate and is now in the House. You strip everything out of it. You take the bill you want and you put it in it, and then you pass that. And then you say to the Senate, hey, look, this is your bill you've already passed, so you can just concur, we're good. So when they send it back to the Senate, that is essentially what happened without the normal hearing process, without the normal give it a go. And 10 days after they initially said this bill was coming, it had passed both houses. So it took 2 months, and then in 10 days, because it was such an urgency, they passed it. What was interesting about that, there is another actor in this, which is the court. the trial court, less than an hour after the House passed it on general orders, the trial court issued a statement, a notice, reminder that they still retain jurisdiction and that asking both parties in the case to submit briefs on the impact of this and connecting to the case those state officers, including Attorney General, Director of Finance, a couple other people, Chris was Secretary of State, our friend Chris, joining them to the case with, and my assumption being that if the court needed to enforce an order around school finance, they would need those state officers to act to enforce the order, so they're joined to the case. So the hearing, the next hearing is going to be on May 7th, which will probably still be going just because there's a lot to do. But we just don't know how this is going to end. The current formula we have, the block grants will hurt us, but it'll hurt most, and we should be really clear about that. And it's not the problem, although you'll hear people say repeatedly, it's a broken formula, it's a bad formula, this, that, it's not about the formula. The formula is actually a good one because it directly connects what kids cost to serve with how we fund schools. And that's the way it should be. And to be honest, and for us, today there was a hearing on a new proposal for a formula, one that would actually bring more money to KCK. So it would mean more money for us. We testified, we presented written testimony as neutral on that bill. It was difficult because we were engaged in the conversations with the senator, but we believe in the current formula. And even though this new one might mean more for us, it's not what's right for kids in Kansas. We need a formula that works for everybody. If it works, if it's the right for everybody, it'll work for us. We can make it work. And we're not going to support something that benefits us at the expense of other kids in Kansas. We just don't believe in that, unlike some of our, more about Jim Henson. Sorry, I'm sorry, that was my rant. That was just, just a little, just one moment. I'm sorry. So we don't know, but that's the most important thing that's happening. Meanwhile, there's lots of other stuff. As I think they're finished now, but the groups, the KNEA, the Teachers Union, School Boards Association, United School Administrators came together and came to an agreement on the issue of the profession. There are legislators who believe that for some reason they think school districts, school boards need help in terms of their relationship with their associations. Even though we've said we're good, we don't need any help. We can work with our association very well. We don't need your help, thank you, we're good. We've been working with them, we believe in teachers. We need teachers to get to the goals we have for our kids. Without teachers, we don't need your help, but they wanted to be helpful. So in order to forestall this, the groups got together, came up with a plan, worked with legislators. They initially passed a bill on public negotiations, professional negotiations, but through an uproar, backed off of it, and then the Senate, 40-0, passed a compromise bill, or passed it out of committee, or no, they passed it. But today, it was on the floor, and they put all the bad stuff back in it. Senator Melcher, that way was they made the amendment, and so we're right back to where we started from on that. That's bad public policy. It hurts. It actually hurts our relationship with our teachers. It hurts our quality staff, because who wants to work in that environment? The state line's like right there. They can find other places to work where we don't treat teachers like they're the problem. So So we're struggling with that. Common Core, or the college and career readiness standards. Here in KCK, our goal is that each student will exit high school prepared for college and careers in the global society. College and careers, that's around the state. Everybody knows that's what we've got to do. We've got to get kids ready for both college and careers. Kansas has college and career readiness standards. It's our version of what you've heard of as Common Core, strongly supported by the education community. It's the standards our kids need. There are those who don't think we do need Common Core. I'm suspicious as to why. You know, they talk about it as local control. We don't need somebody else telling us how to what standards we need. Although ironically, the districts are saying, okay, local control, cool, we want it, so let us have it. But they don't want to do that. They want to prohibit school districts, the state, from spending any money on it. It has failed to pass out of committee, but like, you remember the whole whack-a-mole game in the carnival where the mole jumps up and you whack it and you keep whacking it? These things come back. And that Common Core bill will come back sometime during the session, I'm sure. So, let's see, what else? Fingerprints and background checks, even though we do those with every employee, they're making, the last year they made teachers do them again. Every time a teacher gets a license renewed, they've got to go for a new fingerprint and pay for it. Because, as we all know, fingerprints change. Due process. Last year, they again, nobody asking for it. We believe that if we have a teacher who ought to be doing something else, we have the tools. We've always had the tools that we need to encourage them to find alternative employment. We can do that when we need to. We also believe that we should support and develop our teachers, and that's our responsibility. And that's our work to do that. So we're fine. We didn't need the change in due process that the legislature insisted was so important. Conversation. Some of the conversation Senator Melcher said today, 7 to 10% of teachers should be just gone, without any research or anything. I mean, and it's not this work. And we feel like we can do it without these fixes, but the legislature seems to insist. Think of what else? I'm going to stop because otherwise I'll be ranting like Mike. So I'm going to stop, and you're going to leave questions. Okay.
I have, and I'm sure it affects Mr. Taylor, but it might affect Mr. Smith as well. The KDOT program is near and dear to my heart. That's where I made my living, building highways and the infrastructure. So this money comes out of gas tax and I think some sales tax. It also provides a lot of jobs, and not just on the highways, but they also have a program called a T-Works, and that's supposed to be projected out for 10 years. If you would, kind of help us how the depletion of the KDOT money and how that's all going to turn out.
Well, in the State House, we kind of joke that it's called the Bank of KDOT. They have the governor, not just this governor, but in past years, the legislature and the governor have used the Department of Transportation as like an ATM. Because federal money comes in and the gas tax, as Norm said, and they plan since 1999, 10-year highway plans that improve all kinds of the work going on in K7 right now to redo that interchange is part of the T-Works program. They see these big pots of money sitting there, and over the past 4 or 5 years, they've taken dollars out of those funds, money that was supposed to go to improving our highways, maintaining our highways, to pay for shortfalls in the general fund budget. The Governor Brownback, he was selected, said, at one time we can't do it again. He's done it every year, and it's because they don't have money to pay the other bills. And eventually, the money that's needed for highways will run out. I mean, they can't continue doing that. And so, at some point, the fear is that our highways will end up looking like Missouri's, where the head of the Missouri Department of Transportation there's something. I-70 between Kansas City and St. Louis will be a gravel parking lot. It's falling apart. We've had great highways, and that's one of the things that, by the way, attracts businesses, because the intermodal site that's been built down by Gardner, one of the reasons they built there was because we have good connections to highways and good highways for them to ship their goods and drive their trucks on. If our highways fall apart and we don't continue improving, that's going to go away. It's one of the short-sighted things I think that our legislature doesn't see, is that taxes are not the top thing on the list for businesses coming here. It's schools, it's roads, it's quality of life. And quite honestly, beyond your question, but I gotta say, quite honestly, some of the things the legislature is doing today hurt all of those things.
Absolutely. You said it.
Just to amplify on that a little bit, cuts away from the new construction. It also takes away from the maintenance of our bridges and a lot of the other infrastructure. I'm not sure how many bridges are deficient right now, but there are several. So, but also to the school of the KDOT program, was my understanding that he was pulling some of that money out of KDOT to fund the schools. Is that true?
I think that there is some funding that goes for transportation. I think, broadly, I think the only thing, and I know there are a lot of questions that we need to get to, but Dwayne Goosen, the former budget director for the state, talks about the fact that so far the solutions to fill the budget gap are not sustainable. They're one-time transfers of money that don't address the long-term issues, which quite honestly is a revenue issue. They've cut to unsustainable levels, and until they address that, they're not really addressing the issues. And they're doing it in ways that hurt transportation, that hurt schools, that hurt local governments. It's hurting, everybody is getting hurt by that. And I think that has to be the message. Until they deal with the issue, which is revenues, and the degree to which they've cut taxes to unsustainable levels, we're not going to be able to fix this.
Well, I could see a lot of bake sales coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's see what we got here.
We've got a small enough crowd, we probably, closer. And school teacher, I can read you.
No. Here's a question. How is the unified government planning on promoting for new business to come here, providing families to live, if the schools are in financial trouble?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of mentioned schools and quality of life overall in the last time I was up here, but unified government, we were touted in a legislative committee by the Department of Revenue as being the bright spot in Kansas for creating new jobs. And we've created thousands of new jobs in Wyandotte County. Again, the tax cuts are not necessarily part of that. You've got to look at the overall community. A few years ago, I worked with a couple of lobbyists who work with schools, Dissetti, and Mark Dissetti, and Bill Tallman, and Mark Tallman and Dissetti. And I said, you know what they're trying to do is they're trying to split the crumbs. And I said, you've got to have a quality community, not just good schools. Because if you have great schools, but your community is filled with crime and the streets are full of potholes, who wants to live there? If you have a that looks beautiful, but the schools are bad, who wants to live there? So it's all part of an entire piece that you've got to work together on. So we created this group called the Kansans, and we worked together and created some messaging and said, you know, you can't split us up. It's all part of one piece. That was pre-Brownback era. And I think what we're trying to do is create economic development opportunities. Lower taxes, great, yeah, that's important. But quality of life is important, and good schools are important. And lower that one big piece. And I think part of the problem with the governor and the legislature today is that they don't look at it that way. They kind of isolate things into their ideological beliefs. And it's very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, it's the only thing I would add. I would agree. We need each other. We need, I mean, good schools exist in strong communities. Those two things, you really don't have one without the other. To the degree to which the legislature is attempting to push certain costs to the local level, either to schools or to local government, that hurts all of us. So we see things the same way. We've got to work together. We see our work in many ways as economic development work. So we have lots of conversations with local businesses about their needs and are working to connect our kids while they're still with us in school to local businesses and internships and job shadowing and all kinds of things so that we can produce students and are ready to live and work and contribute to this community.
I'm going to add one more quick point to that. Before this gets lost, I want to just add that, okay, the income taxes got cut, right? And so 330-some thousand Kansans now are not paying state income tax. They're not job creators. I'm sorry, they're not. I talked to my accountant who just did my taxes, and he told me about a business that he does taxes for. It's a family business. They're gross $3 million a year, and the son worked for the family business. He was paid a salary. He paid income taxes. So what they did was make the son 1% over to the business, no longer pays any state income tax. We didn't create a job. It just made the son get out of paying income tax. So we've created all of this $600 million deficit this year. It's going to grow to $1 billion. How are we dealing with that? There are bills out there, and I've been to all of these hearings. They want to raise the state sales tax from 6.1 to 6.3. They want to add that 6.1% tax on all of your utility bills. So your electric bill, your water bill, your gas bill will go up by 6-point-something%. They want to add sales tax to your YMCA membership. They want to increase the hotel 10%. That bill's not out yet, but I've seen the drafts of it, with the money going to the state. So that means if a tourist or a visitor or you and your family decide to spend the weekend at Great Wolf Lodge, you're going to end up paying almost 23% in sales tax on that hotel room. They want to take the 20 mills of mill levy of property tax that goes for schools. It's now exempted from the first $20,000 value of your home. They want to add that to your car. So the way they're solving this problem of cutting the income taxes for 330-some thousand Kansans is by raising all of your taxes, property taxes and sales taxes. It's a shift. And I heard 3 different people from the administration say, income taxes are bad because that tax is productivity. We want to shift that to consumption taxes because people can control that. Well, I'm sorry. All right, if I smoke or I want to buy alcohol, yeah, that's probably something I can control. Or I can drive to Missouri, which I do.
It's not legal though.
But if I want to have electricity or water, I'm sorry, I can't control that. I need to have electricity and water in my house. So it's shifting it to a point that it's killing the middle class. It's killing it. And Wyandotte County, I'm not from here, but I know what happened in the 70s and 80s. When you lose the middle class, and we did here, it kills a community. And it's taken a long time to build it back. And the legislature, the governor doing that to the entire state.
Okay, David, here it comes. He says, I don't understand if the Supreme Court has made a decision more than once. Why is there no legislative accountability? And how does that work that a judicial ruling can be ignored? Isn't that like breaking the law? What part am I not getting?
No, you got it. You pretty. Yeah. At least the first two times, the legislature was nominally responsive. Said, okay, we'll do it. Yeah, we do it like this, but we'll here, we sign here, we'll do it. And then they didn't. They made promises, kept those promises for a little bit of time, and then went off. You know, it's like I liken it to, I have a house, signed a mortgage to say I'm going to pay this amount. It would be like if I decided, you know, I don't really like working full time. I think I'll go to part time. Oh, and by the way, I can't pay the mortgage anymore. Sorry, just I no longer have the money. You know, I don't have the money. Look, you can see I don't have it. Look at my bank account. But if I made choices, and the legislature, and then said, well, sorry, we don't have it anymore. Even though they made choices that made it clear that they weren't going to have the money. That's why we're back in court. And this time, I'm not convinced that those control the Kansas legislature or the governor are going to even make the commitment to do what the court says.
I guess the difference is they don't get evicted.
No, they don't. No, they don't. That's a good point. I'm not convinced that they are going to make the commitment this time. And I'm not real sure where that leaves us. I'm worried about that. It's the hole they dug is significant. To fix it, particularly when the court weighs in on the issue of adequacy, and it's hard to imagine how the court would say that a system that was previously inadequate and now they're taking money from is all of a sudden adequate. When the court makes that, I'm not convinced that the legislature is going to be responsive, and I don't know where that leaves us.
Does that mean there is no mechanism in there of accountability? It's like the court's just suggesting they're wrong, that they don't have to.
The court is unable, the legislature has to legislate. The court can't do that. So laws have to be passed by the legislature. The court can say that particular pieces of legislation are not constitutional and as such cannot be implemented. The court has that in their power. So we could end up with no system for funding schools because we don't have one that's constitutional.
Do you think we'll end up going to a higher court then?
There is no higher court. The Supreme Court of Kansas will make the choice.
And this has been an interesting discussion because what if the Supreme Court rules that and the legislature says, no, we're not going to follow that? There's been a lot of discussion by legal experts, which I am not, about does the federal government have to step in? It becomes what's called a constitutional crisis and ended there. So it's going to be very interesting to watch and see how this happens. The interesting thing is the more the court rules on what legally is constitutional or not, and the governor react by saying, well, you're just activist judges and we want to change this system. I want to be able to appoint who I want on the court. Or, as the Senate did, it's split out from the overall, but I can remember the judicial budget as a separate piece of legislation, and it's a threat. It's like a playground bully. All right, you're gonna do that? We may just defund you. So it'll be very interesting to see.
It's gonna be very interesting. Uncharted territory.
I hate to say this, but it looks to me like we're headed towards privatizing the schools. That's, I mean, what else you gonna do?
There are certainly those who would like to see that happen, who put forward bills on vouchers and tax credits. I mean, we have that now, and they're looking to expand it. There are definitely those who do not value what I see as the bedrock of who we are as Americans, our public education system, which has been, I wouldn't be here without public schools in terms of what they did for me, for my parents, for my grandparents. And many of us in this room and across this country can say that a publicly financed and governed system of education is what has allowed us to be the country that we are. That system isn't free, and our expectations have grown so much from what they were, particularly from my parents' generation, when we didn't graduate that many people, and it was fine because kids without high school diplomas could find jobs in factories and earn middle-class wages and live comfortable lives. And we no longer have that economy, and we now graduate many more kids, and we have more kids living in poverty, and we have much higher populations of students who are English language learners. So the needs are higher, the expectations are higher, the achievement is higher too, but there's just a lot to do, and it's expensive. And there are Sarahs who don't want to pay those costs and are okay with the idea that we're no longer a country where if you work hard and you put your nose to the grindstone, you can be successful. And it reminds me of another one of the issues that's come up, and you talked about it a little bit, and Valdini was very direct. The bill that would prevent children of undocumented people from paying in-state tuition. You know, for us, we know we serve those kids. We have no idea how many, but it could be 10% of our kids. We don't know. We don't ask the question. If they're in our classes, we serve them. They are our kids. And we've always been a country that has been open and has allowed people who work hard and who do what we've asked of them. And when I talk about this, it's not, I think of specific kids whose names I know, who have done literally everything that I would want my child to do, or you would want your child to do, or any of you would want your child to do. Kids who have been the valedictorians of their classes, and yet have to worry, how I've done everything. And now you're telling me there's no money for me? I can't go to college? I love this country. I want to give back to this country. We desperately need these kids to be a great country for so many reasons. And we're going to say that they don't deserve access to the American dream?
And I'll take just a second thought and then make a point that for the past 4 years, the unified government, I've worked with a group called the Kansas Business Coalition for Immigration Reform. And it's the weirdest coalition you've ever thought of. It's the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, who I oppose 98% of the time on things. It's the ag groups, it's human resources, all opposing Chris Kobach and his anti-immigrant proposals. And I started looking at these bills, and I realized that all of these things he was proposing, the costs all fell on local government, on our police department, on our jail, on policies. And so I went to the mayor and commission, and I said, we've got to look at this. And they said, those things. I mean, 30%, just shy of 30% of our population in Wyandotte County is Hispanic. And so they said, go work with them. So I've been working for 4 years with this group, and we worked on the in-state tuition bill behind the scenes, not formally. But one of the things we argued was this is to become a vehicle for all these other things, you verify and all of these other proposals. And so, and Valdenia, you played a major role in that hearing the other day. And it was shut down in committee, and we think it's going to be shut down for the rest of the session, we hope. Excuse me, a lot of credit to the Unified Government Commission for weighing in on that and giving me the authority to go fight those battles too.
As time goes by, we're gonna have more kids in school, and looks like nobody to educate them. This question, there's been hearing that the lawmakers and several superintendents have been working for the last several months on a new funding plan. Do you know what that plan is? Who's writing the plan?
I mentioned that a little bit earlier. It is written by Senator Steve Abrams, who is the chair of the Senate Education Committee. We have been in conversation with the senator because he was one of the people who was instrumental in the Central School, Coalition of Innovative Schools, excuse me, which is, we joined because there have been some pieces of legislation that we have felt have gotten in the way of us graduating every student prepared for college and careers. And the coalition seemed like an opportunity to try some things a little bit differently, to be held accountable for that, but to be able to try some things and move some things out of the way that stand in the way. I'll give you some examples. Right now, across the country, Algebra 1 has been moved to 8th grade, and it's considered a gateway course. If you don't get to Algebra 1 by 8th grade, it's difficult for you, particularly if you're poor, to have the course of study in high school that you need to be successful in college. So they moved it to 8th grade, and across the country, you see that. Well, in Kansas, to get a Regents diploma, you can't take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, you have to take it in high school. It doesn't make sense for our kids. We've been teaching it in 8th grade for years, but that means they have to take some other math course that they don't necessarily when they're in high school. So that was something. We're right here on the state line. For our kids, for us to graduate prepared for college and careers, we talk about Diploma Plus. That they're gonna need a high school diploma, but that's not gonna be enough for our kids. They're also gonna need either a year of college already completed, or a technical degree or credential, or at least a 21 on the ACT, and hopefully up to a 25 so they can get money. That's what our kids are gonna need, given the poverty and the challenges they face. So a year of college, for some of those kids, the course that would be perfect for them are at UMKC or at Penn Valley over on the Missouri side. Wouldn't it be great if kids could have access to wherever they needed to go to take the college classes that they need? Well, right now they can't, because only classes that are taught in Kansas can be counted towards Kansas college credits. Doesn't make sense for us. So another issue is we've got so many more of our kids connected to business and industry while they're in high school. We talk about graduating with a technical degree or certificate. When I graduated high school, 4 years of high school, went on just, 4-year university, that's just was my path. A lot of our kids aren't gonna have a path that's that smooth. And some of it's financial. We talked about the undocumented students, but a lot of our students, almost 90% of whom are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Combine college and work. So if they're gonna do that successfully, they need more than a minimum wage job, a job at McDonald's, a technical degree, CNA or welding, or so. Give them skills that they need to be able to combine college and career. to make a life while they're continuing to educate themselves. For some of those, we don't have certified teachers. There are places they could go to learn those skills, but maybe not to get the certain, with teachers that are certified in biotech and things like that, where folks in industry who have the skills and can really get our kids don't have the credentials to teach our kids. So flexibility in terms of licensure, to be able to take people who've got the content our kids need, pair them with our teachers who have the pedagogy skills, and give our kids what they need. So we wanted that flexibility. That's why we're part of the coalition. Senator Abrams put forward the bill that created the coalition. He then had further conversation with the coalition about a new funding formula, because he believes that he knew the old formula was being attacked. He wanted some voice into a new formula. So we've had conversations. It's his bill. It's not the coalition bill. It's his. There are many things in there we don't agree with. So it is what it is. We feel like his intentions are honorable. We don't think he's hit the mark. We feel like the current formula is a good formula. It just needs to be funded. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense to be talking about a new formula when you're not willing to fund the old one. That just doesn't make sense to us. So it's out there. There was a hearing today. We testified as neutral on it, but we're very clear in our testimony that we need to fund the current formula, the existing formula, which is a good one. It just needs to be funded.
I hear the passion in your voice, both of you, and I don't know how you get every day. This one for the last. I'm concerned about the recent gun legislation that will allow concealed carry without a license in all public buildings. Does this include K-12 public schools? And can adults bring guns into our schools?
I don't believe that not in schools, but I mean, this is where it gets really hard. Recently, there was a situation in Minnesota where somebody with an open carry, I think it was a pretty substantial weapon, walked right up to a public building. And according to open carry, that person had the ability to walk up. Now, teams scrambled and they kind of, did what SWAT teams do. And they came up to him and he's like, what? What you got? I'm allowed to do this. And they had to kind of like slink away. It's like, oh, I guess you do. And until somebody just gets, something terrible happens, there are people who seem to push these things. Right now, you can't carry a weapon into a school building, and so far we've been successful when it's come up in pushing. We started our own police department because we were concerned about, our schools are safe. It's not about anything happening in the schools so much as the potential for external threats. And things happen, things happen in communities, and we want to make sure that we're able to respond. But that's for trained law enforcement. You hear these crazy conversations. Well, we gotta, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I shouldn't call them really crazy. Misguided. Okay. About, we should arm teachers and things. And then, oh God, please don't do that. We don't, that's help we don't need. Our schools are safe, our schools are locked, do everything we can to keep our schools safe, and we're comfortable with that. And hopefully, voices of reason will push back against these attempts to broaden that.
I've had an interesting experience with the gun legislation. A year ago, I testified on behalf of the unified government against the open carry of guns. A little quick history: since the state was a territory, city ordinances have controlled the carry of guns. I mean, think back to some of your old westerns. If you come into town, you gotta check your gun in with the sheriff, right? So there's never been a state law on open carry. It's always been done by city ordinance, and they decided to preempt that. So I testified against that and said, you know, if you're out in western Kansas in a ranching community and the rancher comes in from his pastures with his cattle, he's got his 22 on the hip, goes to the hardware store, it's probably not a big deal. If you're in a Wichita or Topeka or KCK, it's a little bigger deal if you see somebody walking down the streets with an open gun. I was about and I'll name him, Representative Brett Hildebrand from Shawnee, called me out and accused me of breaking the law by testifying against guns because I was a publicly funded lobbyist. Disagreed and said, I don't think that's what the law says. And he called me out, and so I was basically swamped by the media afterwards, and I got on front pages all over the state, which I kind of love. It was kind of fun, you know, it was actually. He turned me over to the Attorney General to be investigated, you know, but I kind of gave this little quote off the top of my head. I said, you know, I find it interesting we spent the past hour debating the Second Amendment of the Constitution. This legislature is trying to use the Second Amendment to trample the First Amendment. I'm speaking on behalf of my community. Well, about 3 months later, I kept looking and I ran into the Attorney General. I've known for a long time, but I said, you know, I keep looking for the opinion about whether I broke the law. And he said, yeah, you don't need to look for that anymore. We declined to rule on that because I didn't break the law. But it's that kind of threat that goes on a bill, and it may well pass in the Senate. Senate Bill 65, there's a bill now that says that public employers, cities and counties, do not have the ability to tell their employees not to carry guns at work. We have a personnel policy at the unified government that says if you're on the clock, if you're our employee and you're working, whether you have a concealed carry permit or whatever, we don't want you carrying a gun while you're doing your job. You can bring it in your car, park it in the parking lot, but don't bring it with you on the job. And this bill would say, no, we're going to, these small government's too intrusive. We shouldn't meddle in everybody's lives. Legislate. No, we're going to tell you, unified government, how to run your workplace. We're going to supersede your workplace policies and tell you, when it comes to guns, your employees have the right to carry them. So we're fighting that one. Again, it's that ideology, and it's so hypocritical. Small government, but yet you're going to supersede it to our workplace. And I made the point, I said, you know, unless you're going to tell General Motors or Sprint or Koch Industries that their employees can carry guns, don't tell us. And they're like, well, but you're a public employer. I said, in terms of running a workplace, it's the same. It doesn't matter whether we're tax funded or it's private funds. We're trying to run a workplace. We have the right rules. So we'll see how that one goes. That one's not resolved yet. But this whole gun thing, I just think, I actually suggested to somebody, I said, why don't we just do an amendment that says it will be public policy in the state of Kansas, when you turn 21, you must buy a gun and carry it. And if you can't afford one, we won't give you food stamps, but we'll give you money to buy a gun.
We've covered subjects here, and please give a hand to our guests, David Smith and Mike Taylor. I want to thank you all for coming out, and our Executive Director of Information is Brandy Fisher.
Right. Thank you again, two of my favorite people, and a great evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thanks to those of you online and to those of you that are watching in the future online. We started live streaming these at our last forum, and so I encourage all of you that are here tonight, we'll send out this link and post it on social media to share it with others so that they can hear tonight's comments. It was excellent. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. I know, and can you remind me of your name? Next to you, your friend. Lori? What is it?
Lori.
Lori, and I don't know if you were at the education forum last month, but one thing I said is everyone bring somebody. And Lori did. She brought a friend, so kudos to you. I hope your friend will join. But what we really need is to help us to grow the network. I've heard so many people say, feel like throwing their hands up in the air, throwing the towel in, that it's hopeless. And 400,000 people voted against this direction, right? And the last gubernatorial race, 49 majority voted for our governor. And so what we need to do is not throw our hands up, but engage those 400,000 and engage them in getting more active and bringing more people in.
The library closes in 30 minutes. If you have materials to check out or photocopies to make.
I promise not to go on for 30 minutes, so the library is closed on 30. So please help us. We send a weekly update out. Please forward that update, encourage others to join Mainstream, to become a member, or just sign up and you can receive the updates free. I want to thank you. I want to thank the program committee and our board for putting this event on. And then quickly, I want to thank those of you who recognized Representative Nguyen and State Board of Education Commissioner Janet Waugh. But we also have a couple of people in the room that are running. And Mainstream has a PAC that endorses candidates. But we don't have candidates to endorse if there aren't candidates running. And we applaud all people that put themselves out there and stand up and speak out, but especially those that are standing out and speaking out with us. But I just wanted to recognize those in the room. And I know that Norm is running for the Board of Public Utilities. And I think we had someone else in the room that's running. What is it?
My name is Victor Tramello, I'm Kansas City Kansas Community College Board of Trustees.
Is there anyone else? Oh, well.
Running for Board of Education.
Representative Nguyen's running for Board of Education. Great. Thank you again for being here. Please join on your way out if you're not already a member. If you are a member, please take a membership form with you. And I think some of you joined. Welcome to Mainstream, to our newest member. And thank you for being engaged and for your involvement in Mainstream. Good night.
Do it again.